Welcome. My name is Yolanda Chimonyo. I'm a strategy and performance improvement consultant. I'm here with Mr. Ngui, an expert in strategic planning, and we're going to answer some common questions that come up when in the strategic planning process. All right, so the first one is, when developing a strategic plan, what period of time should it cover?
Okay, it depends really with the environment that you're operating in. In other stable economies, you find that the strategy can go up to 10 years. In some cases, it can go up to 5 years. But if you come back to economies that are less stable, you will notice that the environment or the variables that you are looking at constantly change. So you can't plan long term. There are certain variables that can be put in the long term context, but the others, they will need to be looked at more frequently. I would say in the context of Zimbabwe, for example, more yearly is much better. But in terms of actual review, a quarterly review would be much better.
All right, thank you. So the next one is, which employees or teams should be included in the strategic planning process?
There are various ways to do it. They work also differently in different contexts. For example, in some cases, you'll find that a more inclusive strategy formulation session is much better from an implementation point of view. One, you get buy-in from the staff. Two, you also know that from research that most of the problems that companies face, the generality of the employees actually have got the solutions. They interact with the customer more than the executive. So it will be good to, most of the time we find that most people don't include the lower level staff or all the hierarchies in the organization because of time constraints and also resource constraints. But ideally you must get everyone involved, not necessarily taking everyone to the strategy session, but you can have a focus group discussion with a sample group of employees at various levels, just to get their input into the issues that are affecting the organization. You can do that. But we know in practice, it's normally the preserve of the few which are at the executive level, which I don't agree with. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So how frequently should we assess the status of our strategy implementation?
Remember, strategy is a lived document. I don't think there is even any time frame that we can say we should look at a quarter or a year, half yearly. The strategy is a living document. As long as you are meeting as an executive to look at the performance of the business, we are looking at the strategy one way or the other. And also, as long as you've got a performance management system, you'll be reviewing strategy one way or the other. So there are tools that you then use to make sure that you review your strategy in that format. That's why I'm saying that I don't think you can actually put a particular time frame. But through those processes that I have already mentioned, we are doing a strategy review.
All right, okay. So when should our strategy plan be revised or updated?
When circumstances change. Remember, what strategy means is that you're just making choices. What to do and what not to do, where to play and where not to play. That's the essence of a strategy. So in terms of reviews, I would say that your business dictates what should be done in your particular. For example, you may find that you've planned a very good strategy that goes for a year. Within a month, there are policy changes that affect your strategy. In that case, you can't wait until certain things happen. You have to make sure that you go back to the drawing board and say, are we still on course? Remember, strategy is about direction of the business. And if that direction is affected by any factors around you or within your environment, you may need to change your strategy, to review your strategy, to make sure that it's too context relevant.
All right. So do we require a department that's specific to strategic planning?
Big organizations do have a department that is specific to strategy formulation and review. But also that particular role is much more encompassing in other businesses, where it's also responsible for analytics, because you're looking at evidence-based strategy formulation and evidence-based strategy tracking. In that instance, you would need to make sure that you have a strategy formulation department. In other departments, you find that is relegated to HR. In other departments, it's given to marketing. In other departments, it's given to a technical person. In other organizations, there is none. There's no one responsible for the strategy, including the CEO, unfortunately. So there's no one who is actually taking ownership. But also remember, the role of strategy and formulation division is not necessarily to devise the strategy, because they don't own the strategy. The strategy is owned by the business. It's for them to give guidance in terms of how do we review, because they've got the technical expertise. How do we gather information to feed into the strategy? Because they're experts in that particular area.
All right, so do we have to adopt a balanced scorecard methodology?
The balanced scorecard, I would give you a scenario like this. It's like someone who is a farmer, and you get a combined harvester. There are farmers who have got combined harvesters who are poor or who actually come up with bad harvest. But they've got all the tools that they require, or they've got probably the most modern tool that they can find. So the tool that you use largely depends on what you want to do. The balanced scorecard is a very good framework, largely because it focuses on 4 perspectives: the financial, customer, internal business process, learning, and growth. And remember, when the balanced scorecard was developed, it was mainly to address a gap that was there. Because companies predominantly tended to focus on the financial aspect of the business. But we also know from the previous scandals, the financial, the Enrons and others, we know that businesses are not only about financial performance. There are many others. Now people have even added things to do with the Millennium Development Goals. They've added things to do with environment, climate, and things like that. So those are all key aspects of the business. So the balanced scorecard gives you a holistic picture to the business. I think it's the most simple, is to use strategy formulation and tracking system framework that I have seen. There are many others, but the choice will largely depend on what you want to achieve as a business.
Okay, so where do we begin when creating a strategic plan?
I'm assuming that the business will not be new. So there's already information about the performance of the business. There's already information about the economy. There's already information about how we should perform as a business. That's what all that information, if you've got a strategy formulation department, that information, this department will then collect all that information and put it together as a starting point. There's a lot of work that must go into strategy planning. Most people think when you then go to the resort to do the strategy, that's the core. The core is not that. That I would put that at 10% of what is required. 50% of the work must be done before the strategy, and 10% must be done on the strategy day, and 40% must be done on the implementation side. So when you put that in perspective, you can see where the work must be done. But in reality, you'll find that 90% of the work is done on the strategy day, not on the before or after the strategy has been implemented. They're creating the challenges to do with implementation.
Okay, so speaking about compiling that information, how would we compile and track that information for strategic?
The compilation is largely coming from the issue of focus groups with the various stakeholders. In some instances, actually, you can actually go out and talk to your customers. What exactly are the problems? What do we want from our business? Because once you get that kind of thing, you can then create a better value proposition for your customers. You need to talk to your employees. You need to talk to your board. You need to talk to your shareholders, if possible. They will have their own interests and perspective that they want you to take into consideration as you are planning. Remember, strategic planning, you are setting a roadmap for the business. And that roadmap can't be done by a few people and coming from someone's head. It has to come from somewhere. Then once you have done the strategy, the execution, remember 90% of organizations can't implement their strategy. And that's a big number. When you look at that big number, you are saying, what else can we do in order to implement the strategy? Most of the time, if you don't involve your employees in the planning process, they are unlikely to buy into it. Okay? And the other issue is that the tools that are then used to track performance are either too complicated for the generality of the staff and even managers, and they resist it. So people when it comes to review, will be told, on this date we are going to have a review session, and people start running around. Once that session is done, they package and throw away everything. Then they come back again when you call for another strategy review session. So the model of strategy review is bad, is wrong, in my view. You need a framework that says the strategy is from planning to execution. Okay. And more effort must be done in the pre-planning, in the pre-strategy session, and also in the post-strategy session period.
Okay, so what differentiates an operational plan from a strategic plan?
Yeah, you remember strategy, there are various ways to look at it. Others think when you're talking strategy, you're talking really high-level stuff. For example, if I would go into an organization and say, what are your top 10 strategic priorities? I don't expect to see more than 10, okay? But when you go operational, you're now going into the detail of how we are going to win. But strategy is about winning, okay? So you lay up your game plan for winning in the marketplace, in your chosen area. But the operational plan is much deeper. And this is where you then find the other levels of employees who are now involved in dealing with the customers, who are now involved in gathering certain information required by the organization in order for it to make strategic decisions. So the strategy in terms of information is feedback from the bottom up, not top down. So that is a required. In some instances, you also find that people call, there are some documents, when you look at it, you think it's called a strategy. The cover is saying strategy, but it's actually just an operational plan. Yeah.
All right. So how many measures or KPIs should be included in the strategic plan?
Yeah, again, like I indicated there, I would not go more than 10 priority areas. Okay? The same applies to your KPIs. I would also not go more than 10 priorities, especially for the CEO and the board. Anything more than that, you're already going operational. Anything more than that, you're probably confused and you don't know what your priorities are. That's why I'm saying let's focus on the top 10. There can't be more than that. And in some cases, you find that people will have a strategy document that is 100 pages. And I don't know what they'll be talking about, because you can actually reduce your strategy into less than 10 pages if it's really focused. The same applies when you're tracking the performance. You can reduce your performance tracking template into 1 page, but we don't need more than that. Then feeding information into that template. That's how it should be done.
All right. So earlier on, you spoke about being able to review your strategy when the need arises. How can we make sure the strategic plan is adaptable to allow for those changes when the need arises? Yeah.
So when you're in the planning phase, I think you must don't set up a rigid strategy. It can't be rigid. Strategy is about being flexible to take into consideration the context changes. So what I would suggest is, or recommend is that as you're planning a strategy, you must leave room for changes. And those changes are not informed by an individual. Those changes are informed by the parameters, most of them in the environment. Okay, sometimes the changes could actually be regulated. You are hit one day by a regulatory change, you're out of business. And these are things. But we also do expect that, remember, strategy formulation, the key is that when you're formulating strategy, you're basically making a hypothesis. Okay, if we do A, we are going to get B. But sometimes your hypothesis is wrong, just like in any research. You find the assumptions that we've made in this particular strategy are actually coming out to be wrong. You quickly adjust and then go back. So that's why the importance of the strategy formulation team that then collects all this information, put it together and say, look, what you said you're going to do and will lead to A, B, and C is actually not coming out that way. Here's the data. You go back to the drawing board. Why? Did we make wrong assumptions? Did we make wrong hypotheses? That's how, for me, strategy is a hypothesis. Yeah.
All right, so thank you so much, Mr. Ngui.
Thank you, Yolanda.
I'm sure we've all found that to be very important for our processes. If you need any more information or have any questions, you can reach out to us on the contact details that will be displayed.